Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. Mastering Mandarin in the modern world. That's a question that's quite important these days. How do you do it? How do you master Mandarin or any language with the technologies that are available to us now in 2020? Well, we just wrote a book called Mastering Mandarin in the Modern World, and we figured that it would be a good chance to preview it in the podcast today. I'll read the foreword, and we'll give you a sense of what the book's about. So this is the foreword from the new book by Luke Neale and Phil Crimmins called Mastering Mandarin in the Modern World. The evolution happened right under your nose. Foreign language learning has been masquerading as an academic pursuit for centuries. People can even get university degrees in a language. I did. Which betrays that we've made a category error when it comes to language acquisition. Achieving literacy and fluency in a language is not an academic subject, and therefore, using techniques derived from an academia to acquire a new language is a mistake. Here's the bad news. The legacy momentum of our educational systems has prevented foreign language departments from upgrading their curriculums. If you go to a university to study Japanese, you'll end up in one of the worst environments you could ask for to properly acquire a language, the classroom with a whiteboard, teachers, and textbooks. That's not going away, and it's only going to go from horribly expensive to prohibitively expensive. But here's the good news. Technological and theoretical evolution in language learning has eliminated the need for academia to play any part. The resources and technology available today are far more powerful tools of education than classrooms ever were. For a fraction of university tuition, you can reach far higher levels of fluency and pass state-certified exams, therefore rendering the higher education of university obsolete. Here's the rub. The evolution is decentralized. A new book here, a web app there, and countless online resources, all with different levels of exposure. As a result, many people simply don't realize that they have other options. They see an overwhelming ocean of content online, throw up their hands, and say, well, can't make heads or tails of this, might as well bite the bullet and go to a university. Stop punishing yourself. Let us remove the obstacle called, I don't know how to navigate this ocean of online content. We'll tell you exactly what works and what doesn't, and we'll use Mandarin to make the most persuasive case. If you can learn frickin' Mandarin with only free or affordable online resources, then you can learn any language. Treat this book as an opportunity. It will be your guide to all the resources, technologies, and mindsets necessary to master language acquisition in general and Mandarin in particular. Not only can you master Mandarin, but the tools at your fingertips have made it faster and more fun than ever before. The best part is, after reading this book, you'll be able to do it without leaving your house. If you're interested in checking out the book, Mastering Mandarin in the Modern World, you can go to our website, mandarinblueprint.com, and you'll see it in the resources section of the website. So thanks so much, and I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. Today's grammar point is GW-Relator-Give-To-PPT-介词-给. This tag is related to the character ge, which means to give, but it can also be a preposition or what we like to call a relator. So PPT in the tag stands for person, place, or thing. Just an easier way to say a noun because a noun, again, it's just any of these grammatical terms, whether it's a noun, adjective, verb, even those terms that most of us kind of get, it's still based on an idea of analytical grammar understanding after a language is already acquired. So what we're trying to do here is give you better ways to think of what it is to be a preposition or to be a noun or to be a verb. And in the case of a preposition, what they're doing is they're relating two things. Sometimes it's a person to another person, it's a person to an object, it's a distance to another distance, places, whatever. Ge relates things in a way of usually meaning either for, or it's trying to create a target from one person to another. But let's take a look at the different usages of ge. And today we'll talk about two of them, and there's two other ones that are a little bit more advanced that we'll talk about later. But one of them is just straight up. It's a verb meaning to give, in which case it's not a relator, it's not a preposition in that case. And so we'll give that as an example to sort of set the framework. But then then we'll move on to the relator usage, the preposition usage, which means essentially for. For example, all my hard work I do for my family. It can also be used as an emphasizer in spoken language when you combine it with the character ba, which is used to shift the object in front of the verb. But again, we'll talk about that later. And it can also be a passive voice indicator as opposed to bei. But we'll talk about that in a future article. So since ge is such an important character, it's really important to master. So let's take a look at some sentences to give you an idea of how this works. So sentence 1 is its verb usage. 我给你钱. 我给你钱. Here's some money for you. And when ge is a verb, first of all, you can always recognize that it's the verb because it's the only thing that could possibly be the verb in the sentence. We have 我, which is a pronoun for I, 你, which is a pronoun for you, and 钱, which is clearly a noun meaning money. So the only possible verb in the sentence is ge. So you know that it's not the preposition usage or the relator usage when it's like that. And when it's a verb, you can actually just directly say it to somebody. For example, if you're just reaching your hand out to give somebody something, you can just say ge in that moment and they'll know, okay, you're giving that to me. And so if there are any other verbs in the sentence, then it's likely that ge is in its relator form. So let's take a look at a couple of sentences here to give you a sense of that. 他经常打电话给我. 他经常打电话给我. He frequently calls me on the phone. Now, before we take a look at this sentence, let's take a look at another sentence that's very similar but slightly different in its structure. 他给你打了电话以后要出去吃饭. After he gives you a call, he'll go out to eat. So we've taken a look at these two sentences, and you'll notice that in both of the sentences, the main verb is dǎdiànhuà, to make a phone call. But in the two sentences, ge is on both sides of the it's on both sides of the verb. So it can actually be before the verb or it can be after the verb. So in both of these sentences, ge relates to giving a call to who. In other words, ge helps show the target of the verb. So in the first sentence, 他经常打电话给我, it's subject plus action plus ge plus target. And in the second sentence, 他给你打了电话以后要出去吃饭. It's the subject plus ge plus target plus action. So what's interesting is that you can have ge on either side of it. Now, it comes before the verb more often than after it. But let's look at a common scenario of it coming after. Here's sentence number 4. 请把你右边的那本书拿给我. Please hand over the book on your right-hand side. So here we notice that it's 拿给. 拿 is the primary verb, which means to hold or pick up. Let's look at the next sentence here. 妈妈送给女儿一台照相机. Mom gave her daughter a camera. So here we have 送给. So we once again, 送 means to, in this case, 送 has a couple of potential meanings, but it means to give a gift. So 送 is the verb, ge indicates that there's a target, and then whatever comes after it is the target of the verb. So in the first sentence, it was 拿给我. 拿给我. Right? So that's the target is 我. In the second sentence, it's 送给女儿. So the target is 女儿, the daughter. So in both these sentences, ge comes after a one-syllable verb. It's often when it comes after, it's after a one-syllable verb, like na and song. And it indicates the target. Again, this is not an ironclad rule that it's like a one-syllable word. Verbs precede ge and two-syllable or more words come after ge, but it comes most often in this format. So now that you know the potential structures ge can have as a relator, you'll notice it all the time. It comes up very, very frequently. So use this video and this article to note the ways that you can correctly use ge, and your input will be that much faster. Remember, as always, grammar rules are meant to help you recognize patterns, not to teach you the pattern in the first place. So, it doesn't really matter that sometimes it's before or after the verb. The main thing is just to know that you can do that. One of the things that Katsumoto always used to say that really struck me with All Japanese All the Time on his website was that if you want to get across that something can be done grammatically, that's as far as you should take it. Just say, this is acceptable. You can do something. If you can put "给" after the verb and you can put "给" before the verb, and you see examples of where it's done that way, that's all you need to do. You don't need to ask why, and you especially don't need to ask why when something is wrong. If you say something a certain way and a Chinese person or a Chinese teacher tells you this is actually incorrect, that's as far as you should take it. That didn't work. Do not investigate why, because I'm not saying don't investigate why, just recognize that investigating why is not helping you acquire language. It's helping you maybe understand how the language is structured, but that doesn't help you acquire the language really. So just bear that in mind as you move forward. "给" is essentially getting across the target of the verb. So if you want to get across that there's some sort of target when it's in that relator form, that's the way it's used. So that should help you. And when you want to see more sentences that have this form, look up the tag in your flashcard software, GW-Relator-Give-To-PPT-介词-给. Next, we'll move on to the comments and emails that came in this week. I had a lot of great stuff come in. So let's start with the comment by Chris Peebles in the community forum. He says, "Hi everyone, I just wanted to share my personal experience with the Mandarin Blueprint. I've been wanting to learn Chinese for many years, so about a year ago I decided to finally give it a try. However, like what was mentioned in some of the posts, I tried many of my own strategies, either completely top-down or completely bottom-up, both of which were based solely on rote memorization, and I just became discouraged." That's not surprising. "One day, however, I became so frustrated I decided to start back at ground zero. So I did a Google search about Chinese curriculum. I was fortunate enough to discover the Mandarin Blueprint. This has allowed me to drastically increase the rate at which I learn the language. Finally, I feel like I'm actually accomplishing something. I just began phase 3, and it just feels so magical that I can read and understand complete sentences without pinyin. The method is fun and, more importantly, highly effective. I just wanted to send a shout out to Luke and Phil and the rest of the team at Mandarin Blueprint." Well, thanks so much, Chris. And, it's not at all surprising that rote memorization would be discouraging, because it is in and of itself it's just such a drudgery, and then it doesn't even work that well. So it's such a frustrating experience to do rote learning. And, that's the whole reason we made Mandarin Blueprint, was to try to make that a thing of the past. So I'm so glad to hear that you're finding the course to be so effective. Next, Aaron Michael Ho in the community forum. "Morning all, started working on shen this morning, which is the 10th character in the Mandarin Blueprint method. And the video brought in the syringe prop. I was wondering, what is the difference between the prop syringe and the prop crucifix? What made the prop crucifix better for gan and ban, and the prop syringe better for shen?" Well, it's not that it's better, it's that it's an alternative. So what Aaron's referring to is the prop that we choose to represent shi, which means 10 by itself, but it also just looks like a plus sign. And we go with the Christian cross or the crucifix because it looks like it. So that's one potential prop you could choose. But the syringe relates to the fact that shi is the primary component in the character for needle. And syringe is just a great prop, because if you imagine a syringe full of like some neon green liquid or something, and you inject your cat with it, and it turns into cat Superman or super cat, then that could be a really cool scene. And so you can imagine that there's a natural logic to I inject somebody with something and then there's some kind of reaction. And that's the type of thing that really hooks into your memory. So we just say, okay, you could choose one of those two props. You could even maybe choose both of them. You could sometimes use syringe and sometimes use Christian cross. Or you could save Christian cross for something else or save syringe for something else. The point we're making in the course is that you have more than one option. And when you're this early in the course, you might as well just go with the main suggestions we give you. But just remember that as you continue, you may find that you're really good at picking your own props. And if you pick your own props, that's going to be even stronger, because the derivation of the prop is your own lived experience. So hopefully that helps you answer that question. Phil Challenor by email, great name. Loving the course. I first tried learning Mandarin with the Michael Thomas method about 12 years ago. Haven't heard of that. I should check that out. Or maybe it's Michel Thomas. I don't know. It was good, but I was frustrated that I had no clue how to read Chinese, so I could take control of my learning, and all the books I looked at had no actual method for learning characters. They just said unhelpful things like lots of characters are pictographs, and would show the character for mu, which is like tree. That's obviously not helpful for most characters that don't look anything like what they represent. Yeah, that's like 85% of characters, yeah. No, 96% of characters. They'd also just show you how to draw the characters, and I didn't have the inclination to spend hours learning them by constant repetition, as I speak other languages too and wanted to read stuff in those languages. Plus, I have a full-time job, right? I pretty much gave up for that reason, though it's always been a nagging regret that I did so. I saw your ad on Facebook and was really interested. I got the pronunciation mastery course first and I loved it, and then subscribed halfway through for the full course. The Hanzi movie method for learning the characters is terrific. It's really addictive as well. I blasted through the first 12 levels and 100 characters in 11 days because I was really enthused by the method, and I know it's going to get quicker now. I've learned so many of the components that make up the other characters. It's great being able to have a mnemonic for each character, so I understand why it looks like it does. I have been using Anki Web for over 2 years now to keep me up to speed with vocabulary in other languages I speak, and so the spaced repetition was really a good aspect of the course for me. I still learned some things I didn't know about Anki from lessons you include on it though. I'm due to start level 13 today, and really looking forward to getting into the sentences now. I've got enough characters down to start reading without pinyin. Really brilliant course. Well done for this, Phil. Well, thanks, Phil. And, this is such a common thing that we find, is that people try other methods and then they find themselves sort of disenfranchised with the method and then go, oh, well, I got to find something better. And so I have a lot of respect for people who do this, because they're just not easily able to give up, right? Like, they don't just go, well, this didn't work, so I'm going to give up. People who really take the Mandarin Blueprint method seriously end up having a lot of success, because they're the type of people who go, this didn't work, so I'm going to find something else that does. And I'm just glad that we finally have the ability to provide that for people, because before it really was quite a challenge to find something that really works. Awesome, Phil. Glad to have you on the course. Al Roy by email. He says, with the arrival of warmer weather, I've taken my Anki studies out to the backyard. Very much enjoying this process of having conversations with imaginary people as I go through the cards. The neighbors, if they can hear me over the background noise, must think I'm pretty weird by now, but it's all good. The mo card just rolled around, and I made an end of it pretty quick. So mo means like final or end. Like mo means the day of the apocalypse. It's like, sort of that kind of end times. So he said, I made an end of it pretty quick. I just looked up at a tree that towers above me. See attached photo. Oh, I guess he sent the photo. Pretending to fling a razor blade at it, and yelled, that's the end of you. So, right. So he's got the tree, which is one prop, and then the razor blade, which is the other prop. Side note, it's interesting to note that the first time I encounter a mostly new sentence, meaning containing words I haven't spoken out loud before, I struggle to get the words and intonation to come out correctly, and at about 1/4 of normal speaking speed. After they roll around the deck a few times, they just roll off the tongue. And if anything, I have to make myself slow down to keep down with Annie and Jerry. This stuff is awesome moving forward. That's great to hear. Yeah, that's a thing that can happen with the sentences, especially when you're first starting. I know that Al is like in phase 3 of the course, I believe, right now, which is when sentences start. And it's that sense of like when you first start off with the sentences, it's going to be tough. Like, it's not like you're going to be able to instantly articulate them easily, but that's the beauty of Anki. Like, one of the things I find with people a lot of times is that they'll discover that their first time going through something, they struggle and they're like, well, this is really hard. I don't know if I can handle this. And it's like, it's a completely normal feeling. I get it. We all get it. And we just forget how quickly our brains are able to adapt if we just give ourselves some rest, which is exactly what Anki does. Anki gets it so that you see it and it's hard and you're like, geez, that was hard. But then you move on and you do other things and you let your brain go away from that difficult thing. And your unconscious is an incredibly powerful element of your brain. It's more powerful than your conscious mind by many thousands of times. And so by giving it a chance to just sort of stew with the idea, then when it comes back and it's recalled from your long-term memory, then you'll be surprised at how much you were actually unconsciously practicing it during that time. And it's an amazing thing about our brains. So when you use Anki, that's what ends up happening. And it's great to see that you're even getting to the point where you need to slow down to keep down with Annie and Jerry. I like that. Annie and Jerry, of course, being native speakers. Next, Joseph Sutcliffe by email. Hi, Luke and Phil. I would like to quickly leave a review and tell you how thrilled I am with the Mandarin Blueprint course so far. I am studying and working full-time at the moment, so my progression through the course is quite slow, but so far it has been fantastic. I have spent a short period of time living in Beijing and studying at the Confucius Institute, and neither has helped me develop an understanding of the language like the Mandarin Blueprint. Pronunciation mastery is able to break down what seems like endless waves of similar sounds that can make a huge difference when using Chinese in the real world. Additionally, the way it breaks down pinyin into recognizable sounds and points out small tricks that really go a long way to help. Although in lockdown, I have been able to have some basic conversations over Instagram voice messages with Chinese friends in Melbourne and around the world. I am far from perfect in how I speak, but that has not stopped them complimenting my pronunciation or being able to understand any feedback they have given me when I go back to reference the videos on Mandarin Blueprint. After the virus passes, I am planning to travel to SJTU to complete a master's in political science and develop my language skills. The Mandarin Blueprint has been the first educational tool that has given me hope that the latter is not beyond me. I hope the next stages of the course are as effective as pronunciation mastery, but there is nothing to suggest it won't be. Best, Joseph Sutcliffe. Well, I'm thrilled you're having such a good time. And yeah, that's great to hear that your Chinese friends are complimenting your pronunciation. Not surprising that our pronunciation course is pretty comprehensive. So, and that's a great idea that Joseph has there for anybody listening. You know, going on Instagram, finding some Chinese people on Instagram that are willing to trade some voice messages. Why not? I mean, voice messages are great because usually there's an option to cancel them. So if you want to start saying something and you realize, this isn't working, you can just cancel the message and try again, which is nice. You know, that's not something you could do if you were in regular conversation. So that's a really good piece of advice there from Joseph. It's also very, you're doing a good job of taking the bull by the horns. So well done. And best of luck moving into the Mandarin Blueprint Method. You will not be disappointed. Another email from Al. He says, one interesting thing I've been finding with your system is that it even works when I get my prompts confused, in that once I've really learned the prompts, which with some of them takes extra time, I find that I notice when I use the wrong prompts in a character. Case in point. I've been reviewing several characters today. Most recent one is in, that contains the da prop, which in my usage is the giant Paul Bunyan. However, when I was learning the Pitbull character, qián, I chose Hulk, Dog Dynasty, the Pitbull, because he is a huge pitbull and therefore easy to remember. Over the past 2 days, as I do my Anki reviews, I've probably found more than half a dozen characters, not sure exactly how many, where I had written my movies with the Pitbull prop, instead of the correct prop, which in my case is Paul Bunyan. But what I've discovered is that when I go through the reviews and see the character and then play the movie back in the theater of my mind, is that right away I recognize that something is wrong with the script. I think it through, and each time I realized that I used an incorrect prop. Here's my kanfa on this, this is opinion. Because of the way the Mandarin Blueprint Method uses memory, I see the progress as holographic. This actually ties in with my little boy of how I understand the brain to work, at least from some science articles I've read. Apparently, at least in some cases, brain injury patients who have lost some memories with permanent damage to parts of the brain, where it was previously assumed was the sole location for memories to be stored, have been able to recover at least some memories. This seems to indicate that different parts of the brain, at least to some extent, are capable of sharing the job, or perhaps sharing the load might be a better way to say it, of storing thoughts and whatnot. Just as a my point here. I'm also aware of some of this research, and it's surprising. Memory is actually stored all over the brain, it seems, and which is the point that Al's making here, which is sort of surprising. You would think that it would be like, here's your memories in this like hard drive in your brain, but it doesn't really work like that. It's because a lot of memory is tied to senses, and the different senses are not all functioning in one part of your brain, right? Half of your brain is dedicated to visual functioning, which is pretty incredible. It's all more or less just theory at this point, as I understand it. But as the decades roll by, we will undoubtedly learn, hopefully exponentially, more about such things. But in the meantime, purely on a subjective level, I am finding that the premise seems to hold true to whatever extent as I learn words and characters. It's a truly fascinating thing to look at how we ourselves learn something, even while we learn it. But for me, at least, I find it even more fascinating to observe how the mind is able, if given the right tools for the job, to actually discern with some efficiency when a mistake is made. I don't recall ever having that happen when learning things top down. Exactly. That's so important, because bottom-up learning, what it does is you're creating the foundation first. And therefore, if you picked up the wrong brick to put in the next slot, it's just a matter of replacing that wrong brick with the right brick. But if you learn top down, and like, I don't know, the analogy might be something like you start to build the roof before you finished building the second floor of a 3-story or of a two-story house, then the roof is going to be flimsy. And if it falls, it goes all the way to the ground, and you have to completely, like, you imagine that if you're trying to build an upper level and you build like the roof above it and a piece of it falls out, it might knock over many other pieces of it and it all falls to the ground. Whereas when you're building a foundation first, you just replace the missing, the wrong piece with the right piece. And it's a lot simpler to fix the mistake. And so that's a great point that Al's making. He also sent us another email. He was really thinking philosophically the other day and sent us a few emails, but they're all great. So he sent us another email saying, one other thing that seems to be happening more freely now as 我在我的椅子坐. All right, so this is by the way, you should say 我坐在椅子上, right? So I get why he said this, but it's interesting when there's a movement-based verb, like for example, 去 or 走 or 坐. 坐 means to sit. So when there's a movement-based verb, you switch where you put 在. So normally I would say, 我在家录播课, which means I'm at home recording a podcast. But that's saying where I'm at in a non-movement-based sense. Like 录播课 isn't a movement-based verb. It's just a recording podcast, not movement-based. But if I say 坐, that's like I go from standing to sitting. So there's movement involved. If that's the case, you say 坐在. 我坐在椅子上, which means I'm sitting on the chair, right? And so that's just a little point there. But I do appreciate that Al is trying to output as much as he can. And so just bear that in mind in the future. So what you're trying to say there is one other thing that seems to be happening more freely now as I sit on my chair, as 我坐在椅子上, is that as I roll through the decks, perhaps because I am outdoors today and feel somehow more free, the movies are almost 自动, automatically, playing in front of me. Let's see, as I see each character. I reviewed, and right away there was a big glass made with top secret alien technology sitting in front of that qián that you can see in the photo. So if there's a photo of Al's backyard that's in the show notes, and you can check it out on the video as well. But if you're just listening to the audio, it's just there's a can that you can see in the photo. So he says, inside was the Chatterer Cenobite, Google Hellraiser movie for more info on that, as my pen prop. So this is the prop that surrounds the other prop. Okay, so inside was the Chatterer Cenobite as my pen prop with a pile of dirt hovering over him in midair, inside the glass cage. Jet Li ran up, leaped onto the top of the qián and dropped down through a hole that is located at the top of the cage, which I've just discovered is about 5 or 6 feet taller than the qián. A fight then ensued between them, which lasted for a full week before Jet Li jumped up the dirt pile and exited the enclosure, leaving the chatterer behind. During the fight, hooked chains shot out from the nether regions of hell, extra-dimensionally, and dug into Jet's flesh as the two of them fought. Jet, of course, had his own superpowers by virtue of his playing the lead role in the One movie. So there was no clear victor in the battle. What's interesting, though, is that all of what I've just described took place in a matter of seconds, right in front of me. It's like having a very lucid dream while wide awake, in the sense that I decide what happens, what is allowed to happen, and how and when it happens, etc. This is powerful stuff. A few weeks ago, it was a real struggle just to do a simple Henzi movie. Now I find that as I roll through the decks, I am constantly tweaking them, typically to simplify the script and toss out unneeded cruft. Cruft, I haven't seen that word in a while. One wonders what other practical applications there could be for such techniques. Maybe stock markets? Who knows? I remember reading through a book called Mega Memory by Gary Trudeau. This was roughly 25 years ago. It was a fascinating concept, and mainly out of curiosity, I attempted to employ his methods, similar in ways to yours, to learn the names of about 30 people that I had just met. As we all sat in an introduction circle, this was 1993. I found that I was easily able to say the names of everyone in that room, and I was just as shocked by it as the others present seemed to be. Decades later, I've forgotten almost everyone who was there. It was a mere point of curiosity at that point in time and seemed like an awful lot of work to actually make myself go through the motions of linking all those names together. And truth be told, it was a lot of work mentally. It was tiring. Looking back, I realized that I never saw any real practical application for such methods, and also had no idea that although it felt quite unnatural to me then, it could get easier with time and constant application. Much easier. It took my somewhat casual interest in Mandarin Chinese to give me that impetus needed to be willing to exercise some long unused mental faculties, to discover that with constant application, not only is the process not tiring now, but also feels like second nature. So this is hitting on some advanced sort of thoughts I've had about this before in terms of what it is that, these mnemonics really provide for you, because I mentioned before that I first learned about mnemonics in elementary school from Mr. Oates, my 4th grade teacher. And I actually had a similar thought, and I've had similar thoughts throughout my life until I got to using mnemonics to learn Mandarin, which is like, what am I really going to use this for? Because sure, you could put in some mnemonic work to remember certain things, but I didn't have enough of a reason why, because again, when you start off, it's not that easy. Sure, it's maybe more memorable, but it like you said, it's fatiguing. But you got to the other point, which is that as you continue to develop the skill, it's like any other skill, it gets easier. This is such a huge part of education. Education always starts off with frustration in the fact that you can't immediately do it. You're not immediately a natural. And sometimes you're a natural at something, and that's great when that happens, and it's good to discover that. But for the most part, you're not a natural in the things that you learn. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn it. And once you accept that, okay, I am gonna suck at whatever I'm doing for a while, some period of time. But then after I do that, I will have a general grasp of all the things I'm trying to do, and it won't be nearly as difficult. It'll be orders of magnitude less difficult. And so, for example, a lot of times when you start a new job, you can't believe how much work it would be just to do a number of things. It could be a simple job. It could be you're washing dishes, and then you feel there's so many dishes, how am I ever going to keep up with it? But as you do it, you're going to figure out techniques to do it quickly and to do it efficiently. And then next thing you know, you're going to be able to get it done so fast. Here's an example, a personal example from my life recently. It's just that we've recently had a lot more sort of customer input to the Mandarin Blueprint website and our email and whatever. And a lot of times I need to answer questions relatively efficiently so that I can get to my other tasks, right? And it can sometimes feel overwhelming. It's there's so many messages coming in, but when I get faster at doing it. I sort of have a system and it kind of ends up going quite quickly and I get everything to inbox 0 and next thing you know, I'm fine with everything that's happened. And so I've kind of sharpened the saw of how to quickly respond to people and get them what they need. And at the beginning of that was very intimidating. And now I feel like no stress about it whatsoever. So, you're really hitting on a lot of great points here, Al, and I appreciate you sending the emails in to share your thoughts about this because now I can share them with the larger community, and I'm sure that other people will find that very valuable. So thanks so much. Next, we have an email from Norman. Norman says, "Hi, Phil. My reason for wanting to learn Mandarin? Well, I am married to a Chinese woman. That's a good reason. When we met in China 18 years ago, she didn't speak any English, so we used an interpreter while I was in China. When I returned home to Australia, we met on Skype for quite a long time, and during that time, she learned a little English, and then when I finally married her, she immigrated to Australia and then took ESL lessons. Her English is quite reasonable, but she is stalled at a low level and doesn't want to go further. Australia has a large Chinese community, and therefore she really has no need to go further." That is definitely the truth. There's a lot of Chinese communities in, it's just all over the world. There's a Chinese diaspora, really, and they have their own communities and they stick together. So a lot of times Chinese people will not necessarily know as much English if they're in an English-speaking country, but for those of you Mandarin learners, that's good because that means that they won't fall back on English if you go to a Chinese community and see if you can make some friends. Anyway, back to Norman's email. "I am interested in speaking Mandarin so that I can have a better relationship with her and with her daughter and the daughter's husband. By the way, the daughter and husband speak good English, but whenever they are together, all they speak is Chinese, so it is very difficult and even frustrating for me to sit and not know anything about what they're talking about. I'm feeling very overwhelmed at the moment because I seem to be getting an overload of information from your course. I've studied the first 3 parts, and using the Anki decks, I feel that I'm doing well, but also decide to go back over the first 3 parts to consolidate my learning." I assume that he means the first 3 units of the pronunciation mastery. "I haven't been studying the Chinese characters as is suggested as well, so I need to start that. I want to take my time, but at the same time, I feel I'm moving forward, which is not, I want to feel like I'm moving forward, which is at the moment not happening. So there you have it. I'd like to hear your comments on my situation." Well, I mean, so it relates very well back to what I just was talking about with Al. At the moment, you're still in that stage where it hasn't sort of gotten to the point where your basic system is down and therefore gets easier. So my basic suggestion would just be keep going. And if you feel overwhelmed, just add less new content each day and make sure you're staying on top of your Anki. The biggest key right now in your stage is making sure that Anki becomes a daily habit. And once it's been a daily habit for even just 14 days, maybe, you'll find that it becomes like brushing your teeth. Certainly for a month. Like if you just do it every day for a month, it'll become a normal everyday activity, and that will help hugely. And of course, you always want to make sure you don't overload how much you do each day. So you'll be fine as long as you just keep going. And I know that can sometimes be an annoying answer. It's like, just keep going. But I promise you, as you continue, you'll start to have enough of a wide understanding of what you're covering that it will feel less intimidating as you move on. If you're only in Unit 3 of the course, you're still really early. So, and you do have this great motivation. So when you're feeling like, I'm not sure if I'm moving forward, what will help you keep going should be the thoughts about trying to have a better relationship with your wife. So that's some good stuff, Norman. Thanks for writing in. Christopher Millsap on Pick a Prop for Ban. He says, "Thanks, guys. Got it. Super clear now. I figured out where I was confused, and it's not with the prop of the character and the component being the same." So Christopher had originally asked a question about why do we learn the character for ban and then learn a prop for it right after? Isn't it just horns, twins, and a stick? And I said, basically, well, ban is a major character in other characters like pan duan de pan, which has ban on the left side of that character. And so therefore it's better to just have one prop for all those, for all of that than having 3. And so that's what he's responding to. It's the keyword connection and component being the same. So for example, for ban, my keyword connection is a half pint of beer. Also, my prop for ban component is a half pint of beer. This is perfectly acceptable, yeah? You guys rock. Thanks again. Yeah, that's absolutely acceptable. It doesn't have to be that your keyword connection ends up being the prop, but it could be. So if your keyword connection ends up being a half pint of beer is a perfectly fine prop, so you could do that. That's perfectly acceptable. Howard So on Anki Dixon's side, now just look how solid that foundation is, which is the end of the foundation course. He says, hey, Phil and Luke, thanks for putting this together. It's been a fun learning journey. It took me just over a couple of months to get here, and I am eager to get started on the next phase. Before that, I was hoping to get your advice on the following. Please excuse the long post. 1, I've gone through the course relatively quickly, so I have a backlog of several hundred new Anki cards. I don't feel 100% confident about my recall just yet. I'm planning to hold back on learning new words for 2 to 3 weeks and just review more new cards, so I can get the Anki number down to a more manageable level. Would it be better to just keep going? So I'll answer that question first. So, really, I mean, it sounds like you did a thing that a lot of people do, which I can't say is absolutely wrong, but it's not the way I would do it, which is, it seems that you've decided to do a bunch of learning on the site and then later go and unsuspend the Anki cards. And that's an okay way to do it, but I prefer, and I recommend that you do this moving forward, to unsuspend the cards in Anki that you specifically studied that day. Like if you studied a sentence that on a certain day that's related to a new word you learned, unsuspend that sentence card before the end of your study session and make sure that you're never going too far ahead in the learning process as you are in the reviewing process. They should really be at the same time. And so if you're finding that you're getting too far ahead, that means that you are going to struggle with your recall because you're not unsuspending an Anki card until days after you originally learned the concept. So, you know, you're a smart guy, Howard, so you might be able to handle that. But like, really, you should review the thing you learned the same day and then review it again tomorrow for it to have the most effectiveness. So what I would recommend is catching up with your Anki, and then once you've caught up and your Anki and the learning content are the same, start the intermediate course. But as you're doing the intermediate course, stop your study session with 15 minutes remaining or however long it is and unsuspend the cards that are the exact cards you learned that day in Anki. Howard's second question. I am able to recognize certain characters immediately when I read them, but sometimes struggle recalling certain aspects of their movies. For example, I'll forget the location or a prop. But I've probably read them so often that I've acquired them in a top-down fashion. Well, it wouldn't be entirely top-down because you originally had the movie, but I see your point. Should I put in the effort to recall the details just in case, or is it safe to assume that I have them down cold now? Well, as long as you know the components, the meaning, and the pinyin, initial and final, and tone, then you've got it. So just judge yourself on how well you know the character. It is okay to forget the movie as long as you've gotten to the point where you see the character enough in context that you've properly acquired it. Like an analogy to English would be, at some point you, like for example, this lesson is called, now just look at how solid that foundation is. The word foundation wasn't always in your vocabulary. At some point during your childhood, it entered your vocabulary. And then you saw it enough that you'll never forget it ever again. So the Hanzi movie method is meant to get you from knowing nothing about the character to seeing it in context enough that you'll never forget it again. And so that may very well be the case, in which case it doesn't matter that you've forgotten the movie. So I would say that, but I would say that you just have to ask yourself that question. Is there any element of the character that I haven't properly memorized? And if that's so, you need to go back into your scene and update it. Howard's third question. I'm struggling with writing words that sound similar. For example, is it 运气 or 运气, which is a different qi there. Reading is fine, but it's tricky when I write as I need to know the precise word. Any advice? Well, I mean, that's an example of when you see qi, the first one. They're a similar character, except the only difference is that the second qi has the water component on the left, and it means vapor, whereas the first one means like air and gas, or it can mean like a more metaphorical air that somebody has, like 男子气 is like a masculine air about a person. And so, whereas the qi with vapor is more like, for example, 汽车 is automobile, and so it's like it's saying using burning the gas and creating the vapor to power the vehicle, and the small explosions to power the vehicle. So what will happen is that as you understand the different characters, because you've seen them in different words, you'll start to know, well, it's not going to be 运气 as in vapor, because we're talking about luck here. So 运气, he's got the lucky air about him. So it's the kind of thing where as you understand the characters more by seeing them in different contexts, then it'll be harder to get it wrong. So while I understand the concern, I think it's the type of thing that's just going to fix itself as you continue to move forward. So thanks, Howard. Thanks for bringing in those questions, and I hope that was helpful. Next, we have a comment from Charlie Weston on bonus. Strategy is everything while learning Chinese. He says, I really value hearing your experiences, Phil, because it's so similar to the frustration I've had with Chinese. You've helped me bring me back from the brink of just packing it all in. Thank you. Yeah, so that video is about kind of how I struggled with Chinese at the beginning because of all the materials that were so frustrating, textbooks, classrooms, all that stuff. And so it sounds like Charlie's been in that case, in that situation before. So yeah, totally get it. And I absolutely empathize. And, I'm glad that you didn't pack it in, because, that feeling of I'm about to give up comes right before you're about to never give up. It's kind of an interesting recognition that I've sort of had a few instances in my life where I've gone, oh, after I thought about giving up and didn't, I never considered giving up again. So it is true that what comes right before never giving up is really wanting to give up. Or put another way, what comes right after really wanting to give up is never giving up. So I think that you're probably set for your Mandarin learning journey at this point, Charlie, in terms of motivation. Barry Hill on nasal final ang, bang. Thank you for your reply. It was very reassuring. Barry had asked a question that was sort of related to how am I going to handle all of the different sounds of the language? Am I going to remember all these things? And I gave an answer via a short screen share video. I have downloaded the Pinyin app and will use that as well. My only question is, can I reset the Anki cards to let me practice more than once a day? At the moment, it says after one round that it's already finished for the day. Incidentally, my partner is Chinese and isn't a great help, but your course is the best, most useful and clear course I have done. Thank you. Well, if you're finding that you want to review more, I wouldn't recommend over-reviewing an Anki, because that kind of assumes that there's not new stuff that you could review, and there absolutely is. Of course, there's plenty of new content you could continue to add. So if you're finding that I'm not reviewing enough, I'm not having enough content come into my, my Chinese studying life each day, that just tells me learn more content and unsuspend more Anki cards, get into the Mandarin Blueprint Method, and there's endless content there. You're never going to be lacking for content with the Mandarin Blueprint Method. So if you're finding that you want to review more than once, then you should just add more content. Why? Because the Anki algorithm is based on years and years of research. And so the idea is that it's, as I mentioned before, it's better to recall things from your long-term memory to solidify the neural connections that relate to that idea. So if you can imagine that you've got a neural connection that gets created the first time that you run across a new fact, it's not going to be strong, but you see it again in 10 minutes, you've added a layer of strength to it. There's actually a layer of fat that gets placed on the neuron, and I've forgotten the name of it right now. I'm sure that I'll remember it, later today. But there's a sort of layer of fat that gets placed in the neuron, which actually helps keep the electrical signals from dispersing. And so myelin sheaths, that's what it is. So myelin sheaths start forming around the neural connection. And if you can imagine that electricity that's traveling between one neuron to the rest, if there's not a good it's like a wire. It's like you imagine the plastic around a wire. That's what keeps the electricity in and not just dispersing into the air, right? So every time you review, you add myelin to these neural connections called the axon. And so each time you do it, you add it. But what adds the most myelin? You could ask it like that. Well, it's not just looking at the fact over and over in one study session. It's looking at the fact, understanding it, and then letting it go for a while, and then coming back to it after your brain's gone to a totally other place. And then you're able to add it more robustly. And then each time you do, you don't have to, each time you add a sheath of myelin, I don't know if it's actually like literally a sheet, but let's just imagine it for the sake of understanding the metaphor. Each time you add a sheath of myelin, the ability of the electricity to move between the axons of the neurons gets stronger, and therefore doesn't need you can wait longer before adding the next sheath of myelin. And that's what Anki does automatically. So it says, see this fact when it's new, then see it 10 minutes from now. You got to write again. Okay. See it 1 day from now, 24 hours. Okay. You got to write again. See it 72 hours from now. Got to write again. See it 7 days from now. And each time you're making the connection stronger. So what that means is that you can actually be in a situation where you are getting more and more facts in because you're seeing and recalling the previous facts, the minimum amount necessary to still remember them. So therefore you can fit more. And that's why my ultimate message to you, Barry, is to add more content if you feel that there's not enough that you're reviewing each day. And that should be good news because that means that you can study faster, essentially. Rebecca McCarthy on bonus conversation connectors. She says, this is brilliant. I'm going to use this for my French students as well as for myself in any language. This course gets better and better. You guys put so much thought into Mandarin Blueprint Method. It is amazing. Well, thank you, Rebecca. We just did a short case study with Rebecca. Hopefully that'll be out later this week. And she's a French teacher, so that's cool. She can take some of the educational materials and apply them to her French class. And yeah, the conversation connectors are cool. Like they're a really good idea for kind of helping you out with that. A lot of helping you out in conversation to say things like, well, to tell you the truth, frankly speaking, just things that are really not saying anything, but keep you speaking. That's really helpful. I will say though, we've kind of made a mistake with them in the sense that we've introduced them a bit early in the course. We should have waited to introduce them until later, but we'll fix that at some point amongst the many other tasks. Next, Phil Challenor on time to get real about sentences. Really great. The only one I didn't recognize was huò, but when I read the translation, I was able to recall my Hanzi movie for it, and it suddenly jumped out. Great stuff. Yeah, see, once again, there's that foundation showing up, and building a foundation doesn't mean you never forget things. Of course you forget things, but it's way easier to fix it. Oh, the brick fell off, put it back on. And, so you forgot huò for a second, but then it came back. And that's fantastic stuff, Phil. Keep it going. Jack Brady on New Vocabulary Unlocked. 儿子, 日子, 小子. This is in phase 2. I agree. This course is so well done and intricately planned by using old vocab in sentences we've learned already. Yep. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad to hear that. And, it's true that we put a lot of thought into what's going to come up for you. And it's not necessarily obvious to the learner, but I'm glad to see that you can pick that up there. So that's great. Dom Thompson on New Vocabulary Unlocked for 门口. Good question here. He says, question about 1楼 and 2楼. So 1楼 and 2楼 are basically first floor, second floor. He says, in English, the first floor is up one flight of stairs. And what he means is, I guess he means British English. The first floor is up one flight of stairs from the ground floor. In Mandarin, does 1楼 refer to street level or the level above that? Street level. There may be exceptions, obviously somewhere in the certain buildings. But yeah, generally speaking, 1楼 is on the ground floor. So good question there. And I did learn that. In America, it's also first floor, tends to be the ground floor. But I know that in England, it can be the other way around. Rudolph Krimpaski on New Vocabulary Unlocked for 身体. And we did do a case study with him a couple weeks ago. And he says, our grammar building has this sentence. 你身体看起来不舒服. You look under the weather. Should it not be with the 的? 你的身体看起来不舒服. Similar to another sentence we have, 我的身体不舒服，很想吐. Right, so this is a good question from Rudolph. The 的 can sometimes be omitted, and when it's most commonly omitted is when you have a very close relationship with the object of possession. So, 你身体, your body. Well, you obviously have a very close relationship with your body. You are your body. So it's like the possession of your body is so close that it's like the idea there is that you could omit the 的 if you want, but it's not required. You can add the 的. So when they say 我的身体不舒服，很想吐, that is a sentence where they didn't omit the 的. So it's not a requirement to omit it, but you can. And that's all you need to know is that it's possible to do that. Next, we have Al on level 21 complete. He says, not wanting to be oversimplistic here, but while some great points were brought up in that video, I suggest that at the same time, we humans have a bit of a tendency, myself included, to overthink things when we are learning. Ain't that the truth? Perhaps that is more true with learning a new language than it is with most other things. With the above in mind, I'm going to suggest that it can actually be helpful to just take some things in stride and accept the clearer understanding will come later with use. Absolutely. I can't agree more, Al. That's absolutely true. For one example of this is Hai and Huan. There is a sentence I read today where the speaker says, in effect, I still haven't been paid back, or something similar. I don't remember just at the moment. The same character occurs twice in the same sentence, each time with a different pronunciation. That's right. Yeah, so hai can mean still, and it can, if it's pronounced huan, exact same character, it means to return, like, I'm returning a book or something. Taking into account that the speakers are Annie and Jerry, both native speakers, I just took the usage and pronunciation in stride, trusting that inasmuch as the native speakers are comfortable saying it that way, then it will make sense later, if not immediately, which it did, simply because I accepted it in its contexts. So yeah, it's good to understand things, but it can also be good to let some things go, trusting that the understanding will come later. So I say, try not to sweat all of the details, guys. Well, I completely agree. This is so true. It's the same reason why when you get to the extensive reading phase of your Mandarin learning, where you're reading texts that you understand 98% of, part of the reason why that's such a good place to be is that you can just move past something you don't understand, and then it'll come up again later, and then you'll have more context by which to understand that. So absolutely agree. Don't get too caught up in the details, because what will happen is that it's like your brain thinks that if I don't get this now, I'll never get it. And it's just an incorrect premise. Just because you don't get it now does not mean you'll never get it. As a matter of fact, the fact that you don't get it now raises a question in your unconscious, and then later that question will be answered. It will be, because you're not going to stop reading the language. The language is you're not learning Chinese just to stop at some point. You're going to keep going. So when that happens, you'll have more and more opportunities to recognize these things. Galia Warrior in You Did It. This is the final lesson of pronunciation mastery. She says, phew, I've done it. Wow. Thank you very much. It's been the best habit I've picked up during these lockdown because coronavirus times. Really enjoyed your guidance through the unusual and tricky pronunciation points. I'm looking forward to continue exploring this language and 100% to get back to some of the videos of this course again and again. Well, yes, the pronunciation mastery is a great course to reference a lot in the future. You can always go, hey, how is it again that you say the C in Chinese? Was it cai or something like that, or tao, or how do I say that? You can always go back to that. And so remember that, and remember to reference the Google Slides or the EPUB files, depending on your platform. There's always some good stuff that can help you practice. So glad to hear you got through the course, Galia, and look forward to seeing you in the Mandarin Blueprint Method. Trey Sisson on Pick a Prop for Tong. I'm a bit confused by the request to create a prop for a component that is also a character. In this case, I originally chose 2 umbrellas as suggested, which were part of my movie scene for Tong. Now it seems like I should be coming up with a separate prop that represents the pair. For example, Siamese twins, ducklings, etc. Why not just imagine 2 umbrellas for the component? Why the request to have a separate prop? Thanks. It's because the full character Tong will be a component in more complicated characters. So there's, for example, 种 adds another umbrella into the prop. You've got 丛林的丛, which adds a razor blade at the bottom. You've got 纵横的纵, which means that's vertical. It's the character meaning vertical as opposed to horizontal. And so there's all of those characters contain the entire character for 从. And while you could imagine two umbrellas, by chunking it into one prop, you give yourself less things to remember in the future when learning those characters that contain the entire character 从. So that's the answer, and I hope that makes that clear. Jack Blood on Unit 3 wrap-up. He says, man, my mouth's getting sore, which is great. That means in the pronunciation mastery, he's practicing properly. It should be sore. It's just like how you feel after you've had a great workout and you go, oh, I'm sore, but like it hurts so good. And that shows me that you're actually working on getting these mouth muscles to develop because they just haven't been developed because you weren't speaking Chinese. So for every part of Chinese that isn't coming from your native language background, you're going to have to build up those muscles. And so, of course, the beginning, they're going to be somewhat weak. And when you work them out, they're going to be sore. But in the same way that, you become less sore after going to the gym after you go enough times, then the same thing will happen with your mouth muscles. So that's great to hear that that's the situation you're in at the moment, Jack. And yeah, keep it up. The final section of the podcast today will be some movie scene shares that we got coming in, or people explaining how they took the actors, sets, props, and scripts to put together a scene to remember a movie, to remember a Chinese character. So first we have Qián Clayton on Make a Movie for Ban. So this is in phase 1. She's very early, so let's see how she did. It's character number 6. She says, my friend Ben is in the bathroom of my apartment in Japan. Right off the bat, fantastic. B in Ban, because this character is pronounced Ban, is Ben. And the bathroom is 4th tone. And apartment in Japan, that's the AN of the Ban. She says, we are off to a gay bar for Halloween, and he wants to be half devil and half Jesus, so he is wearing horns and wearing a huge gaudy crucifix around his neck. I love it. That's so great. Ben decides he wants to be a smooth-shaven young Adonis, so asks to borrow a razor blade. I'm half and half, he says proudly, as we step out the door, and guaranteed to be half cut in no time at all. Too broad to catch the meaning? No, I think you can very clearly visually explain that, especially if when he wants to be a smooth-shaven young Adonis part, you could make that one half of him, right? So it could be like he shaves half of his body and he's got like a lot of body hair on the other side. So like maybe the body hair side is the devil side and the half side or the shaven side is the Jesus side. And you've got, of course, having the crucifix as one of the props makes the Jesus devil thing make sense because the horns is the other prop. So you got the devil horns and the Jesus crucifix. And so that's fantastic. That's awesome. That's a really good use of the different props to come up with the meaning. So well done, Jan. You're going to do really well with this. Not too broad at all. Next, Al Roy on Make a Movie for Sway. EI set in the kitchen. Regan McNeil from The Exorcist. Oh yeah, she's a memorable character, the girl from The Exorcist. Is sitting on a bloody red carpet on the floor in the kitchen at Jade Springs Restaurant. Propped up against a brick wall, with her head twisted around backwards. That's what happened in the movie, sure. Casually watching Place Boing's new Joe Biden video. No wonder she's so twisted. I haven't seen this video, but he left a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. Superman shows up, dressed his casual duds, scoops up the girl. I wonder if that's a typo. Dressed his casual duds. I'm not sure what that means. Scoops up the girl, the carpet, and the brick wall, and takes them away. This is just a casual job for him, as he usually has bigger fish to fry. So Regan is the representation of the yǒu component, which means possess. So she's possessed, obviously. And there's a red carpet, and it's a bloody red carpet to make it even more visual. And the brick wall is propped up against the brick wall. And so the usage of casual here, you're trying to cover it in a few different ways with Superman, and also how she's casually watching the Joe Biden video. So sounds good to me. I mean, we'll see if you stick with the understanding that means casual moving forward, but it very, very, very well may work. All right. Another one from Al on Make a Movie for Xin. The qián set in the backyard. My XI actress believes, the meaning of the character, that Chuck Norris and Donald Trump are literary legends. So she invites them to the backyard of the qián set so she can recite Vogon poetry to them. Some people never learn. She's concerned that no one will believe that she had them over for tea, so she poses for a groupie photo with them while they're visiting. Right, so this means believe, and so that makes sense. I guess, the believe, also that they're literary legends, so I guess that's the right side component there with the literary section to it. And yeah, I think this will work. Let's see here. Xin. I'm not exactly sure how exactly Donald Trump fits into this. I guess maybe he's the right side component. Chuck Norris is obviously the left side component. And I certainly get the idea of no one will believe this, so take a photo. That's a strong enough connection in all likelihood. I guess Donald Trump's the representation of the right side. I'd be curious to hear why you went with that, Al, because I'm not quite seeing the connection there, but still, it'll probably work. Final one for today is from Dan Helsloot. Dan Helsloot on Make a Movie for Bu, which means do not or no. Batman is in the bathroom of my childhood home. He stares at his reflection in the mirror, and you can see he has a samurai sword and razor blade attached to his back, with the magic wand in his hands. Yeah, nice. Okay, so razor blade, samurai sword, magic wand. Those are the three. Those are the three props. With the magic wand in his hand, he points at his reflection in the mirror, and suddenly it is not there anymore. Then he points to himself, and he himself is not there anymore, leaving an empty, eerie scene. Yeah, this is good because we have not expressed by the disappearance, and that's cool. I would say the sword and the razor blade aren't very involved in the scene, so like I'm not sure exactly. Let's think about how you might make that work. Maybe what you could do is before he does the magic wand thing, he takes the razor blade to draw a big circle, right? And then he takes a samurai sword to draw a line through the circle so that in his reflection, he sees himself with like that sort of, circle with the line, meaning no or not allowed. And then he puts them on his back and then does the disappearing act. That might make it a little clearer because the sword and the samurai sword and the razor blade aren't very involved in that scene. So once that's done, I think the scene will be perfect. So awesome, Dan. That's all for the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast today. As you recall, I mentioned that the book Mastering Mandarin in the Modern World is now out, so check that out on our website, and we look very much forward to seeing you next week. Take care.